आप सभी का जैन टॉक्स के 72nd सेशन के अंदर स्वागत है। मैं हूं नील और आज मेरे साथ पैनल के ऊपर प्रोफेसर पंकज जैन हैं। साथ ही साथ जैन दर्शन की तलस्पर्शी विदुषी मिस संगीता शाह और हमारे आज के मॉडरेटर प्रणव शाह हैं। आज हम एक बहुत ही रोचक विषय के ऊपर बात करने वाले हैं। हमारा आज का पहला विषय जैनिज्म एंड इकोलॉजी के ऊपर रहेगा और दूसरे विषय में हम इलेक्ट्रोमैग्नेटिक वेव्स जो रेडिएशन होते हैं उसके कारण कैसे वायलेंस होता है जैनिज्म के पर्सपेक्टिव से, सो उसके बारे में जानेंगे। तो मैं स्वागत करता हूं आप सभी का जैन टॉक्स के 72nd वेबिनार में। और आज हमारे दोनों सेशंस का मॉडरेट करेंगे मिस्टर प्रणव कोठारी। सो प्रणव कोठारी, आपका स्वागत है जैन टॉक्स के इस पैनल के ऊपर। आपका पहले भी जैन टॉक्स के मंच पे आना हुआ है और मैं सबको कहना चाहूंगा कि हमारे जैन टॉक्स के वेबिनार्स की शुरुआत यानी हमारे सबसे पहले मॉडरेटर भी प्रणव कोठारी थे, जो टेडेक्स स्पीकर है हार्वर्ड यूनिवर्सिटी से, जिन्होंने एमबीए किया हुआ है और भी आज हमारे साथ इस सेशन को मॉडरेट करेंगे। तो हम स्वागत करते हैं आप सभी का इस जैन टॉक्स के पैनल के ऊपर। मिस्टर प्रणव कोठारी।
Thank you, Neil Bhai. Welcome, everyone. Good morning to people in the US and good evening to people in India. It's a privilege to talk to both Dr. Jain and Sangeeta ma'am today. And मैं कोशिश करूंगा कि इस ऐसे प्रश्न हम पूछें कि हमको बहुत कुछ जानने को मिले उनसे. So I will endeavor that through the questions we ask today, we all get to learn a lot. And this doesn't have to be done by me alone. Please definitely put your questions in the Q&A box, and I will take from there. और ये मेरा अकेले का काम नहीं है. आप जरूर अपने प्रश्न भी Q&A बॉक्स में डालिए और उसमें से हम रीड आउट करके दोनों से ज्ञान प्राप्त करेंगे. So first of all, Dr. Jain. Very interesting. He is originally from Rajasthan. Rajasthan, mein he has gone to all the districts and he has also actually visited all the states of India. So very widely traveled person. He also lived a lot of time in the US. He was the associate professor in the Department of Philosophy and Religion at the University of North Texas. And right now he's the Dean of the Arts and Humanities at the Vijay Bhumi Universities. So, both while he was in the US, he was co-chair of the India Initiatives Group. So, he was very connected to India in multiple ways. उन्होंने बहुत सारा लिखा भी है. उनका अभी लेटेस्ट इंटरव्यू न्यूयॉर्क टाइम्स में आया था और नेटफ्लिक्स में एक शो है द स्टोरी ऑफ गॉड where Morgan Freeman actually interviewed him. So, if you like what you hear today, you can get more of him on Netflix. He has actually compiled the history of Jains and Hindus in America for his latest monograph, which is The Dharma in America. So if you want to read more, you can go to that. He's also translating the Jain Darshan, which is actually a very big, large volume on the philosophy of Jainism. And is working on his fourth monograph, which is who are the makers of modern Jainism. तो उन्होंने बहुत लिखा है, बहुत पढ़ा है, बहुत सारा चीज पब्लिश किया है, including co-editing the Encyclopedia of Hinduism, as well as a volume on Indian and Western philosophical concepts. So again, welcome, Dr. Jain. I'm so happy to have you on.
Thank you, Prof. Nice to be here. Thank you very much.
So, Dr. Jain, अभी तो मास्क फैशन में आ गए हैं. कोविड की वजह से सब लोग मास्क पहन रहे हैं, पर अपने जो मुनि ऋषिज, अपने जो गुरुज थे, वो तो बहुत पहले से ही मास्क पहनते थे. तो what is the science and what is the rationale behind wearing a mask? What does it do? How does it protect both the person who is listening, but also how does it reduce and how does it benefit the speaker? So we'd love to hear from you.
Right. Jainism is very little understood outside India, as you know. Jains have been living in Nepal for many decades now. Jains have a temple in Kenya and Africa. There is a Jain temple in Japan and also a couple of temples in Thailand, which that I visited, and now around 100 Jain temples across North America also. But Jainism is very little understood. It's often called as an offshoot of Hinduism, which is not true. And Jains have been iconified with their monks wearing those masks or Muhapatti in Hindi or Gujarati, as we call them. But that's a very small segment of Jains. Only monks and nuns in only a couple of subsects of Shwetambar Jainism. Jains, mein jo Digambar and Shwetambar, there are two major sects. Within Shwetambar, there are Terapanthi and Sthanakvasi. Only Sthanakvasi and Terapanthi, monks and nuns wear them. And that also started just only a couple of centuries back, actually. So that started when Sthanakvasi subsect was formed by Acharya Bhikshu. And when he thought that he's trying to reform Shwetambar practices, so he came up with that idea. My understanding of the masks or Muhapatti is simple, that I think they want to avoid ingesting any microbes or anything that is floating around in the air. So that's one purpose, to avoid that kind of violence. Second, this is my humble interpretation, that I think because Jains have been so careful in avoiding all kinds of violence, so when they are putting that masks, when the monks and nuns of Sthanakvasi and Terapanthi subsect of Shwetambar, when they are putting the masks on their mouth, I think it can be interpreted as if they are trying to avoid the violence, even violence to consume more air than what is barely needed for their bare survival. So avoiding the ingestion of microbes, but also avoiding extra ingestion of air. Air is also one sense beings, one soul beings in the Jain tradition. Air, earth, water, fire, all of those have souls. So why consume more air than what is barely needed for your basic survival? That's my second interpretation. Third interpretation is that I think masks, when you put mask on your mouth, you're always being careful not to speak more than what is needed. Be very economical, be very laconic in your speech. Be very careful in your ingestion of air and avoid violence of microbes. These are my three interpretations that I can give by masks, by the subsect of Terapanthi and Sthanakvasi.
Interesting. So, one is about like how not to harm a lot of the microbes. They may be invisible, but they're still there, and by speech they're also getting spreading. And I think in a way, someone is telling you, "Okay, come bolo," or maybe you are
Exactly.
talking more sense.
Exactly. Suno zyada, bolo kam.
So, Dr. Jain, आपने बताया कि जैसे there are these elements you mentioned. There's air, there's earth, there's water. But I think a lot of the Jains typically are more obsessed with life, right? जान बचाने के लिए, या हम जैसे बोलते हैं कि जीवदान करें, right? So there's a tremendous focus that Jains have on one hand, obviously कि जो गाय कत्ल खाने जा रहे हैं उनको we stop the cows from getting slaughtered. But I've seen many friends and relatives who also, even if there's a very small ant, right, उसको भी बचाने की कोशिश करते हैं. And I think the principle of Ahimsa and non-violence is very deep when it comes to life. But there is so much other forms of violence that we unintentionally do. Like we have Jains who are in the construction business, Jains who are supporting the mining industry through diamonds or chemicals, right? And those things are also hurting the earth, air, water. So why do Jains generally are over-indexing on life and placing tremendous importance on that? But when it comes to other forms of ecology, उतना same level of ध्यान नहीं है. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yes, a good question. Very good question. So I'll take you back to a text called Bhogopabhog Vrata. In that, there are actually lists of professions that Jain householders are encouraged to pursue, and some other professions and careers that they are discouraged to pursue, right? So I'll read out the list. I have it in front of me. So they were Jain lay people were discouraged from trading charcoal, timber, pulling animals in cart, consumption of alcohol, slave trading, weapons trading, trading of poisons, sugarcane trading, seeds trading, firearms trading, construction of lakes were all prohibited by Jains. And historically, if you look at more than 2 millennia of Jain history, you will see almost never Jains doing all these kind of trades or professions or careers. What they were doing instead was always in either you see them in trading industries, banking industries, commercial activities, clerical activities. Yes, diamond trading will come to diamond in a second. Traditional medicines, arts and crafts, government or rural, working for government or rural, or manufacturing industries, or publishing and media, or education industries, educational activities. Diamond is the only, I think, the sore point, and Jains have, I think, been the leaders in the diamond trade. It is said that every diamond that anybody touches in the world has passed through either a Jain or a Jew. Jains and Jews have been leading this trade for now at least a century, if not more. So yes, so that is because I think historically, I think Jains were not aware. Probably it was their honest ignorance, probably in my judgment, that they didn't realize that diamond is coming at a huge cost of violence. It's called as red diamonds, really, literally red, with a lot of violence in Africa. Now it is very clear with so many documentaries and everything is already available on YouTube that how much violence there is in the diamond trading also. The Jains have to be aware now. They have to be made aware, and they have to probably switch to a different profession. But now Jains are such big leaders across the world. You go to Los Angeles or Florida or Dallas, where I was for a decade, in New York, where I was there also for a decade, New York, New Jersey area, and of course Mumbai, Kurla Bandra complex, or Palanpur, or even Surat and Jaipur also. Jains have just captured the whole industry. We like it or not. So it's going to be very difficult in shifting from this career or profession to a different profession. It's just nature of the trade. The Jains have been leading this. Just as so that's how the nature of the thing. But historically, Jains have avoided the violent professions, and they've always preferred less violent. You have to do something. You have to survive in this world. So they have been doing something. So 100% idealism approach, if we take, everything has some consequences. By even our talking has some consequences, our breathing has some consequences, even vegetarian food has some consequences. There is karma particle even with vegetarian food. But the idea is to avoid as much as possible and to prefer least violent professions and careers. That's what James said.
No, we have got a message from Ramesh Kumarji, Ramesh Shahji on the chat where he says कि 2,500 साल पहले Jains were also warriors, and in fact Rishabh Dev created the classes based on profession. So who are we to sort of put a restriction today on this profession? And he also says that in fact do you not believe that in every profession Jains will bring their legacy and help in reducing Ahimsa in a sense?
Yeah, that's another
help in reducing violence.
That's another interpretation. I mean, this is Anekantvad, right? I'm not the final word. Nobody is the final word for anything in Jainism or even general global context. Everything is very context sensitive. We have to contextualize what we are saying. I just wanted to share the list from Bhogopabhog Vrata text. So that's one interpretation. Another interpretation could be, yes, why not? Historically Jains avoided travel. Now Jains are a sizable force in America. So Jains are bringing their legacy in America. So veganism is spreading in America also. Vegetarianism may not be directly because of Jains, of course, but Jains are very active in the forefront of interreligious dialogue, interfaith dialogues. So indirectly, who knows? Gandhi, for example, Gandhi was directly influenced by Srimad Rajchandra. All Jains actually, in fact, are very proud of that fact. So from Srimad Rajchandra to Gandhi, from Gandhi to Dr. Martin Luther King, and now Jains have joined those kind of efforts in America also. So because of this legacy spreading globally, yes, Jains are in fact taking their heritage across the world. In Thailand, in Japan, Kenya, North America, England, in Belgium, there is a Jain temple. So of course, it has to spread. It has to spread. It should spread. Yes.
Abhi, Dr. Pankaj ji, COVID में, सब लोग घर पे हैं, and a lot of people had to cook for the first time in their lives जब lockdown हो गया था. And I grew up in a home जहाँ मेरी दादी कभी आलू प्याज नहीं खाती थी. Now my mother-in-law has also never tasted it in her life. And when I also got into the kitchen, you had these variety of vegetables, right? And in particular, जो जमीकंद जिसको बोलते हैं, गाजर, आलू, प्याज, लहसुन, जैनिज्म में बोला जाता है कि इनको नहीं खाना चाहिए. तो प्लांट्स, हम अगर प्लांट्स खा रहे हैं वो उनमें भी तो लाइफ है, जब वो खा सकते हैं तो ये जमीकंद में ऐसा ज्यादा हिंसा वाली क्या बात है कि ये पर्टिकुलर रूट वेजिटेबल्स नहीं खाने चाहिए.
राइट, वही बात वही ग्रेडेशन की है. See, already meat is already prohibited because that's like direct. So killing a chicken or a cattle or a goat is equated with killing a human being according to the Jain tradition of violence. So because all of those are five sensed beings. So equal amount of negative karma or pap will be accrued if you kill a chicken or any mammal. Basically, any mammal is same as killing a human being. So that's probably Jainism is the only tradition in the world that equates killing a mammal with killing a human being. Or so all those are five sentient beings. Now, what is allowed to be consumed by human survival is one sense beings. Right? So in one sense beings, as I said earlier, earth, water, fire, and air, and plants were allowed. Now, even within plants, then the gradation comes. So why to kill an entire plant for our consumption? Why not just take the byproduct of the plant? See, there is a tree, mango tree, for example. Mango is fallen, right, naturally, then I will consume it. That's the ultimate form of non-violence. So mango is already fallen and I'll consume only that mango. I will not pluck any mango from the tree because that is also violence. It might be still raw. So that's just gradation of violence. So when we eat potatoes or radish or Jameenkand, like Jameenkand word itself, you take a look. Zami means earth or bhumi, right, soil. Kand means the product or the vegetable or the fruit. That which comes from underground, literally underground, is going to be more violent because you're killing the root of that plant. Right? So more violence. So why to kill the entire plant? If I can just take the byproduct, let's say mango or a banana, without killing the entire plant itself. So I'm just again choosing the least resistance path, least violent path. So that's again the gradation. And by the way, my grandmother was like your grandmother, and she never tasted even cauliflower, or of course all of those Jamaicans were always prohibited. So it has been running in our tradition for millennia now that even roots and stem were avoided for centuries and centuries. Just a gradation of violence.
Dr. Pankaj, जब ये हम leaves या fruits या vegetables या ये जब हम खाने के लिए यूज करते हैं, that is for our body survival, then understand. पर जब मैं मंदिर जाता हूँ और मैं देखता हूँ कि लोग इसको चढ़ा रहे हैं, और कोई चीजों में जब पक्षाल पूजा करते हैं तब दूध है, या there's a lot of decorative या ritualistic, if I may call it, things that are also happening, right? And in one sense, there is this affinity कि भगवान को चढ़ा रहे हैं, we are making this offering to the God. But on the other side, in a way that we are also, harming some of these things. So how should one think about this? ये अगर debate मन में आता है, तो इसके बारे में कैसे सोचना चाहिए?
Right. This is a great question also, and there is no one right answer or wrong answer. We have to just think from all perspectives, right? So one perspective that I can think of right now is that, I think technically, if you really go to idealistic, or what is mentioned in our texts, I think the only thing that was allowed in our rituals were only white rice, that is rice, raw rice. That also because rice is called as akshat. Akshat means that which never decays. That which is again least violent raw material that we can offer in our puja, in our rituals. But now I think because the overall ambience or overall environment of India is so, heavily influenced by Hindu culture, we have to accept that. I think some of the elements from Hindu rituals have also, I think, entered Jain rituals, in my humble opinion. Some people may disagree, and there could be multiple interpretations. That's my humble interpretation, that this flour and milk and all this probably came from other traditions, probably Buddhism or Hinduism, in my humble opinion. But then I have to be careful. Now, if you go to Bahubali, Shravan Belgola, every 12 years when Mahamastika Abhishek is happening, there's tons of milk tons of sandalwood paste, saffron paste, water is showered on Bahubali Mastak for Muhapatti Abhishek. Prime Minister of India will come and President will come and helicopters are driving, being flown, and all those things are happening at a huge level. Not just one Bahubali Murti, by the way. There is another Murti of Bahubali also in Karkala. There are, I think, 3 huge statues, idols, Murtis of Bahubali that are done. All these huge rituals are done even in Jain tradition. So now again, with as animal farming has started happening, and now we know that milk that we drink comes at a huge cost. A lot of violence is done on cattle, then we get our milk. Now Jains have to stop and reinterpret and be very careful and mindful of this violence. What are we doing? So can we replace milk, offering of milk, let's say by, I don't know, by white some kind of a fluid? I don't know. I mean, I'm not the one to decide. Our gurus and sadhus and sadhvis and acharyas have to decide this. How do we replace more milk, which is becoming more and more violent, with some non-violent alternatives? Flour, you're right. I agree with that. That why offer so many flowers, and which all goes into trash, which is again coming probably from with great cost and violence from farmers and whatnot. So we have to think, sit back, and we all of us have to really carefully reflect on what we're doing. And it's an ongoing struggle. I think that's the beauty. That's the greatness of all the flourishing traditions of the world. That there is no set written word of that which is final forever. You can always interpret them. Our acharyas can interpret them, and then we can reapply and reinterpret them for 21st century. As things have changed, as milk has changed, we have to also, I think, reinterpret and reapply our philosophies in a better way.
So, आज की तारीख में what does it mean to be a Jain? मतलब हमारे क्या कर्म है, हमारे क्या actions हैं जिससे हम बोल सकते हैं कि जो जैनिज्म का जो basic principles है, अहिंसा का, अनेकांतवाद का, many of the others that you have written in your paper also. तो वो जो अगर principles का, अगर आज in today's modern society with internet, with everything where we are, practically जो what does it mean to be a Jain, to be living a Jain, not just a Jain by birth, not just because मेरे पापा मम्मी Jain थे तो मैं Jain बन गया, but if I really want to demonstrate कि Jainism, Jain जैसे कैसे जीना है, तो उसके लिए क्या suggestions हैं आपके?
Right. Again, I think my humble point of view would be that I think American Jains have done I think a good sort of encapsulating Jainism for Jain values for wider public, not just for Jains or Indians who are already familiar with Jainism, Jain principles, but how do we take it to American people or non-Indians or non-Jains, right? So they have come up with 3 A's, triple A's, right? So Ahimsa, Aparigraha, and Anekantvad, which is the 3 A's which have been used many times as they go to interfaith forums and so on. So Ahimsa, obviously, everybody knows non-violence, and which is avoiding violence, and not just action, violence in action, but also violence in speech and even thinking. So avoiding all that violence is Ahimsa, total non-violence, and as much as possible practicing non-violence. Right? Then Aparigraha, cutting down our consumption, cutting down our possession, cutting down on our accumulation. If we have 15 shirts in our cupboard, let's avoid and have less and less. Five. If we have 5, let's cut down to 3. So avoiding that consumption and accumulation and possession. 5 cars, 3 cars, 2 cars, 1 car, or maybe 2-wheeler, or maybe public transport. Right? Then Anekantvad, accepting all the perspectives as partially true. So and then combining all of them to get the full picture. So that's Anekantvad. So these 3 A's I think are really valuable. As you said, nobody is Jain. Nobody can be really Jain just by birth. By understanding and practicing these 3 A's, I think can be really valuable, not just for survival and flourishing of Jain tradition, but for the flourishing of our planet itself. We cannot imagine our planet if we do not practice these 3 principles of Ahimsa, Aparigraha, and Anekantvad. For climate change, for avoiding climate change, for avoiding terrorism, for avoiding all kinds of violence, for avoiding all kinds of polarization that we see in politics and in all spheres of our life. Everywhere we see there is so much violence going on, violence by speech, violence by thinking. So these 3 principles I think are really great contributing factor, can be really great contributing factor. If like you said, if you don't limit Jainism just by practice or ritual, but by really emphasizing and reminding ourselves that what great innovative ideas Jain tradition has brought into the world, not just for Jain people that are born Jain, but for the wider public. We have to understand and we have to share widely these three principles.
नेक्स्ट टाइम अगर आप 3 पत्ती खेल रहे हैं और आपके पास 3 निक्के आ जाए तो आपको याद रखना है कि वो 3 निक्के हैं अहिंसा, अनेकांतवाद और
because other things are common across the world.
Yeah.
Right? Satya, for example, truth is
right.
widely accepted, but these three are, I think, unique and innovative in Jain. That's why I highlighted these three. Yes.
But Dr. like see, these words are at a, let's say, they are words, right? Practically, अगर हम ecology का लें, क्योंकि आपका research उस पे है, आज का topic ये है Jainism and ecology.
Right.
तो if you can tell us, क्या 2-3 चीज हैं जो हम subconsciously कर रहे हैं, जो हमको unintentionally कर रहे हैं, पर उसका ecological damage बहुत high है, और क्या 2-3 चीज है जो हम कर रहे हैं और actually उसका ecological damage काफी कम है. So if you can tell us कि हमारे day-to-day actions में, lives में, what are some things we are doing that are protecting the ecology? What are some things we are doing that are actually harming the ecology, but we don't know about?
Yes, good question. Very nice question. I think what we are doing right already is that despite all the environmental problems that we have across India, right? We see pollution, we see river pollution, urbanization, loss of forests, loss of biodiversity, and on and on. We can go on and on. Those are all negatives, right? But that's mostly because of the booming, exploding population and exploding pollution, exploding plastics, which has been really bad, fortunately banned across India in many cities. But many things are still problematic across. But what are positive about India's society is that our consumption of meat is still very low, very, very less. That's one good thing. So that keeps our carbon footprint less than China, Brazil, and of course less than America or many European nations. So because of our already vegetarian-based lifestyle, those who call themselves non-vegetarians, non-Jains who are calling themselves non-vegetarians, even they cannot avoid lentils and wheat and rice. They will take some meat-based dish maybe, but that would be maybe once a week or maybe twice a week, thrice a week. But main staple diet would even there, if as long as you're Indian across anywhere in India you're living, or even outside India you're living, your diet is coming from lentils, rice, or wheat. Like it or not, yes, you might take some meat dish here or there, but mostly for the most part, our staple diet doesn't matter south, north, east, west, wherever you are coming from in India, your staple diet is mostly coming from vegetarian food items. That keeps our carbon footprint much lower than major economies of the world, including China, Brazil, or other European or American nations, as I mentioned. So that's one good thing we are already doing. What we are not doing so far, especially I think Jains living outside India, for example, US or European countries, or even in India, what we are not realizing, I think, so far, is that our dairy products are also, unfortunately, no longer non-violent, as we already touched upon. So we have to be, and I have to be also carefully reminded, and we have to change our habits to avoid dairy products. The problem is, I think, in India especially, the alternatives are still not widely available. In US or other nations now, non-dairy based milk and butter and yogurt are already now available. Even not so widely, but they're slowly coming up in some parts of America, probably in California or Oregon, progressive states, less so in Texas. So that we have to raise awareness. But our next generation in America, they have set up websites and blogs such as veganjains.com, jainvegans.org, or vice versa. They are spreading awareness. They are telling their parents, you call yourself Jain, how come you are using dairy products? That is a highly problematic phenomenon among Jains in America. So as more and more younger people are becoming aware of the violence associated with dairy, I think more and more people will also turn into veganism. That would be the ultimate, I think, most non-violent way of living our tradition of Jainism across the world, in India and across the world. So I told you both positive and negative.
अभी हमारा weekly family calls में one of my cousins, Suhani Jain, she actually gave us all half an hour talk about how veganism important. And my wife Smita and I, we started experimenting. हमने completely cut down नहीं किया, पर हमने ऐसे decide किया कि milk सिर्फ हफ्ते में 2 दिन आएगा. And then हम लोग को cheese बहुत पसंद है, so we experimented with cashew cheese, and we found like a good substitute, for a big dish.
I have to learn all this.
Paneer and tofu is there. So perhaps, it doesn't have to be all or nothing, right? I mean, you don't have to give up milk all 7 days. You can always do it 5 days and then 4 days and then 2 days.
Good point. And good thing, if I may add, there are 4 or 5 prominent monks and nuns, Jain monks and nuns, who are really pushing for veganism. I think Labdhi Sagar is one of the most prominent Jain monks. On YouTube, you can watch his Gujarati lectures. He is very passionately spreading veganism. Yeah, I want to add.
There's a question from the audience, from Rashmi, who's saying, what is the Jain opinion on population explosion? Is there a solution that Jainism can offer? So that's her question, and I think just adding on to her question, I think ecology, I think काफी impact पड़ता है on rising populations, because they're consuming, they're taking a lot of resources. So if you could answer Rashmi's question.
Yes, of course. Population explosion is again. I think if we go back to Jain principles of basic 5 panch mahavrats, 5 major vows that householders are supposed to practice anuvrat, so minor vows. But monks and nuns, sadhus and sadhvis, have to practice mahavrats, complete brahmacharya. They cannot be even together in the same room by themselves. So just if there is one monk or one nun in one room, that is not allowed. Touching each other is out of question. Being together in one room itself is a problem. So extremely strict practice of brahmacharya. I think the highest, best practice patterns that we have seen is in the Jain tradition. Absolute discipline, absolute, not even touching wealth, not even touching currency, no bank accounts, not riding in any vehicle, and so that all those practices. So brahmacharya, if we take it to the householders level, if we practice, again, not to the extreme, to the what ascetics are practiced, but if we do a gradation of brahmacharya, I think that's a very easy, simple solution for, I think, population explosion, if I may add that. And in general, I think, so be very aware of the problems that are associated. But I think in the Jain community, I think we are at the, I think one of the most progressive, literate communities in India, probably the most literate community in India. I think in Jain community, probably the population problem is not so severe as compared to the communities that are not so fortunate, that are not so privileged in terms of socio-economic status. So that's where we have to contribute. I think Jains have to do, increase their domain of philanthropic activities so that they can take education to masses which are not yet privileged. With education only, I think the population explosion problems can be solved with economic activity, opportunities and whatnot. Jains, I think, are at the forefront of providing jobs also and so on. So it's all interconnected, all these issues.
Right. Thank you. Dr. every day I open my newspaper and there's, stock markets, kitne upar gaye, kitne niche gaye. Companies ke quarterly earning reports are out there. The weather sort of patterns are there. It talks about how many levels or inches the seas have risen, or how many degrees Celsius the temperature has risen. And I guess the latest topic is how many seats and votes has Donald Trump got, right? There is so many numbers that I see on many of these, but, and it gets everyone's attention, right? Whether they are measuring their weight, whether they are looking at height or whatever, there's so much quantification of most of these things. But when it comes to ecology, we don't see the same level of quantification, right? Like, when was the last time I know how many tons of carbon dioxide do I release when I take a flight from Bangalore to Ahmedabad, right? When was the last time that I'm aware of, by use of, fast fashion is one of the biggest pollutions, right? So when I buy a new shirt, like in the colors, in the dyes, in the processing, how much water, how much damage I've done, right? Those things are invisible, right? Do you think if we had more metrics, if we had more visibility, like today when you buy a can of food, it tells you exactly how many proteins and fat and ingredients and red dots and green dots, everything is there. but we don't get the same ecological damage that our other goods that we have bought does.
Yes.
So would doing something like this, by bringing more visibility,
Yes.
bringing more metrics, bringing more transparency, help in prevention of the ecology?
Yes, I think we must do that. I'm a strong proponent of that also. We would all, I think, agree that we need that kind of we have been, I think, obsessed with GDP, right? Gross domestic product. What we now need is gross environmental product or gross nature product. There are people already who have, I think, state of Uttarakhand in India have already started pushing for GEP or GNP, in which we count how many forests we have saved, how many forests we have grown, how many rivers we have kept clean, how many mountains we have kept green, and so on. And so how much air we have kept clean, like you also alluded to. So I think we really need that, because of with that awareness only. I think it has to be, like you said, everything also must have this environmental factor, and then carbon footprint is one also one good step in that direction. So carbon footprint of the entire country, of an entire human being, every day, how much carbon footprint we have created. And again, so far we have been, I think, on the lower side, because our per capita carbon footprint is still lower than other countries because of our obsession with vegetarian food, or our obsession with public transport, which is very good. Our houses still do not have central AC or central heater or dishwashers that are by default across Euro America. Because our consumption is still very less, our carbon footprint is still very less. But as we keep copying what America and Europe have been doing for centuries, what wrong they've been doing, if we start following those, our carbon footprint will also go up. So with that awareness of quantification, I think especially our younger generation have to be, I think, take the lead and quantify all these things and put a label on all the products that we use. I think that can go really a long step to raise awareness and be very careful, very aware of these carbon footprint that we're leaving by our consumption.
Yeah, and Bhutan as a country also measures GNH, which is gross national happiness. And they have a variety of metrics on, including environment as part of that. I know that certain states in India, like Sikkim, are pushing for organic. I remember when I crossed the border over from West Bengal, there were these signs, that organic food, no plastics, I think, has become a big thing in many of the Himalayan states. So I think there is rising awareness, but it's just like, it's a number that doesn't come at the front page of a newspaper. It doesn't hit you in the face as much as some of the others do. Dr. Pankaj, we have another question from the audience, stemmed from Sunil. And his question is, what would you ascribe as the biggest reason for the decline of Jainism, as measured by the number of followers? 2,500 years ago, Jainism was a primary religion of the subcontinent, but today less than 1% of India's population are Jains. So Sunil has asked you this question.
Right. All right. Now it's a very academic question. I have to go back. We all have to go back 2,500 years ago. So Jainism and Buddhism became sort of primary, very sort of, it was the entire age is actually called as an Axis age, where Buddha and Mahavir and Lao Tzu, Confucius, Zoroaster, Socrates, and Moses, almost 100 years here, 100 or 200 years here or there, if you do plus or minus. That was the age when the entire Euro-American region of the world was having these revolutionary figures, epoch-making figures, those who created new eras, those who started new calendars. We have Mahavir calendar because of Mahavir. And Buddha started Buddhism, and Zoroastrianism based on Zoroaster in ancient Persia, and Socrates in Greece, and Moses in the Jewish world. So what happened in India at that time is that Hinduism, Vedic rituals were already very prevalent, with a lot of, many of those rituals were very violent, whether we like it or not, whether we accept it or not. It's fact is that even today in Nepal and in Rajasthan and Bengal, there are still rituals in which animals are sacrificed. You have to accept, and I have seen from my own eyes in Kolkata. If you go in Kolkata, there are still animals. So all those sacrifices, which were very, very mass, everywhere that must be happening. Because of the influence of Buddha and Mahavir, those sacrifices are significantly down now, right? Across India. You see almost nowhere those animals. some places like Rajasthan and Bengal I mentioned. Rajasthan is my home state, so I'm sharing what is happening in some parts of Rajasthan, not everywhere. It's very rare. So even though Buddhism and Jainism are not so popular across India now, but their influence has changed the shape of India. I think has changed the way people were doing rituals. So people are doing rituals. What people are eating every day is all, in my humble opinion, I think a huge contribution from Jainism and Buddhism. Number one. Number two, one of the most senior, or the most senior Jain practicing scholar in the world, in North America at least, is Professor Padmanabh Jain. He's still almost at the age of 90. He has retired from UC Berkeley. He wrote an amazing paper, research paper, an article, in which he has compared the survival of Jainism in India with disappearance of Buddhism from India. Buddhism had to leave India almost and go to Tibet. From Tibet, it went to China, and then down south in Sri Lanka and Thailand, Laos, and Cambodia, and so on, and China to Japan. But Buddhism in India pretty much disappeared until Dr. Baba Sahib Ambedkar came and he brought Buddhism back, which is called as Neo-Buddhism. Jainism has a really interesting and different history. Jainism did not disappear; it survived, although in very less number. But it didn't have to leave India. It continued to flourish within India because of this very interesting kind of deal making in some settings. For example, Jains, you will see Jains monks going to Muhammad bin Tughlaq's darbar in Delhi. Jains going to Akbar's darbar in Delhi, Jahangir's darbar in Delhi, and convincing them to also adopt non-violence and cut down on the meat consumption. Jains have been very, at the forefront. Chandragupta Maurya's grandfather and grandson both adopted Jainism. Ashoka's grandfather and grandson adopted Jainism. So, because of the Jain influence on the kings of the Mauryan Empire or the Mughal Empire and so on, and even in present day, Jains are at the forefront for spreading, spread of vegetarianism, for example. Because of this Jains coexistence and insistence on their moral principles without diluting their moral principles, I think Jainism has survived and flourished in India, although in very less number, yes. But now Jains are spreading across the world. They are making their presence felt wherever they are. So I can go on and on, but I think in the interest of time, I don't know how much time we have.
Yeah, I think great answer. I think what I take away from it is it doesn't matter what is the religion name that you write on the census of India, right? I mean, that number may be 1%. But if the core principles of Jainism, which is on Ahimsa, on not eating meats, on any of those, if those spread, how does it matter whether or not, what that person identifies it? Essentially, is that person, he or she, doing all the principles that Jainism embodies? And maybe that is a measure of checking how fast and far has Jainism spread. Dr. Pankaj, this is the last question for you today before we move to Sangeeta ma'am. It's a question that's come from an anonymous attendee, but I thought it's very relevant because you're a professor. So this is the question. Should one consider a career in Jain teachings, but it's also said that dharma studies should not be charged? So the question is, if we go back and see, then dharma studies should not be charged, but should one Jain consider a career in Jain teachings? If that's the last question for you.
Yes. Again, Jains have done marvelous job in North America. Jains have set up more than a dozen academic professorships and chairs across North America. So I really invite all of you youngsters listening, stop thinking of stock markets and Mercedes-Benz and huge mansions. Think of spreading or practicing Jain values academically, spreading not as a missionary, but understanding them, writing research papers on them, writing research books on them, and writing academic, really high quality research papers and books. That would be the ultimate service to Jain tradition, and to take these values, not the religion as such, but Jain values, like we discussed in the beginning, to take these values academically and help make this planet better. Health of the planet is in danger. Health of all of us is in danger. And I think Jain values have a long way to not just survive, but to flourish, to keep this planet flourishing, green and clean. I think Jain values have a great way to go. And academic career is the way to do it. Not just in North America, here also, all the major universities should have these chairs, professorships, not to spread religion, but to spread these values, which can be applied to a wider context. So, great question, and yes, we must do this. Younger generation has to do it.
Thank you, Dr. Pankaj. You have told us what to spread, definitely not the coronavirus, but a lot of the principles of Jain teachings. It was such a pleasure speaking to you. I really understood that how there is no one answer to something, right? Yes. When we talked about masks and why our Rishi Munis were wearing the Muhapatti, you gave 3 different reasons as to why. We learned that there are variety of organisms. Plants are also living organisms, but because they are one sense, I guess it's translated as ekindriya versus others that are 5 sense organisms. That's why plants are okay to eat, but animals are not. And even within plants, when it's a byproduct, like a fruit has fallen from a tree or a leaf, is much better than eating something that is being cut from the root, like a potato or garlic or onion or many of those things. We talked about how Jains have been doing businesses that have largely been non-violent, but there's always scope to improve on that. And as long as one is mindful of the work that they are doing and finds ways to mitigate that would be good. We learned that, I think dairy itself is now a lot under the radar. So even while you are vegetarian, there's a chance to be a vegetarian plus by moving to vegan, given that, the source of milk products itself causes a lot of emotional as well as other forms of violence to the mother that is the milk is coming from. And we essentially also agreed that if by bringing more quantification on the forms of that are important for us to track in ecology, there's a chance that visibility itself will help reduce the harm. So thank you so much for all your wisdom that you have very articulately bestowed in the last 50 minutes.
Excellent summary. Thank you.